It goes without saying that Freddy Krueger, Leatherface, and Michael Myers are amongst the most recognizable antagonists in the entire horror genre. But these serial killers do have another big thing in common, that they all starred in slasher movies. And even though there have been some standout psychos in more modern slashers like, say, Art the Clown and Ghostface, there are a whole bunch of other ones who deserve a lot more credit than they receive. With that in mind, then, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 modern slasher horror movie villains that went unnoticed. Number 10, Babyface, The Hills Run Red. The Hills Run Red follows a group of film fanatics who are being hunted by the killer from their favourite slasher movie. And while it's mostly a real by-the-numbers B-movie, horror fans should check it out, purely for the big bad called Babyface. No matter how many times you see this lunatic's doll skull mask, you can't help but think that you might need to sleep with the lights on for a little while longer. However, it takes more than a nifty mask to make an iconic serial killer, and what helps Babyface come across as more than just a run-of-the-mill maniac is just how efficient he is at killing. See, in your average slasher, the villain will hack up like 7 or 8 victims, but in The Hills Run Red, Babyface racks up a whopping 15 kills. Through the film, Babyface strangles, slits throats, rips off faces, impales brains with pickaxes, smashes heads with hammers, and of course dismembers bodies with chainsaws. Number 9, The Man Hush. Hush centers around a deaf and mute author called Maddie, who's been tormented by a masked man outside of her home. We know so little about this serial killer that we don't even know his name. But we do know that he's a pure sociopath through and through. He has no complex backstory, and we learn nothing about him that justifies why he commits evil deeds. But based on the way he speaks, the only reason that he kills is because he enjoys it. Secondly, the man has a unique choice of weapon as well, that being a crossbow. Now, at first, you might wonder why the man doesn't use something more conventional like a knife or a gun, but throughout Hush, it becomes clear just how effective this weapon is. Not only can he attack Maddie from afar, but the man doesn't have to worry when she snatches the weapon off him because she has no idea how to reload it. However, the man's defining attribute is of course his mask. The features of his facial covering are so subtle that it's actually kinda difficult to describe. Nevertheless, you just can't help feeling uneasy while gazing at the mask's subtle grin. Number 8, Ted Radford Midnight Movie. Midnight Movie kicks off with a theatre staff inviting customers to a screening of the classic slasher The Dark Beneath. However, the audience members are horrified when the movie's villain, Ted Radford, suddenly comes to life and goes on a killing spree. And yeah, I'm noticing a little bit of a trend on this list. Instead of using a traditional weapon like a machete or an axe, Radford impales anyone he encounters with a huge corkscrew. And not only is it nice to see a wacko wielding an unconventional tool like this, but he's surprisingly creative with how he disposes his prey with it. Also, Radford has one of the freakiest looking masks ever seen in a slasher. Not only that, but his half skull looks creepier as the movie progresses, as every time he slays someone, their blood smears on his mask's bony exterior. Number 7, Billy Murphy, The Final Girls. In The Final Girls, Max attends a tribute screening of the cult classic Camp Bloodbath, which her deceased mother starred in. And instead of the killer coming into the real world, this time around it's the other way around, as Max and the other attendees find themselves transported into the silver screen, forcing them to team up to defeat the film's villain, a masked psychopath called Billy Murphy. Because The Final Girls itself is a satire with its tongue firmly in cheek, it's no surprise to learn that it's littered with horror conventions. And because Billy Murphy is a blatant homage to Jason Voorhees, right down to his weapon of choice being a machete, it would have been easy for the film to turn him into a one-note stereotype, but fortunately, that is far from the case. Number 6, The Slashers Haunt. In Haunt, Harper and her friends stumble upon a haunted house attraction in the woods, which is run by masked figures called the Slashers. After signing liability waivers and surrendering their mobile phones, the group decide to enter the spooky mansion, which, by the way, this should have been their first sign that the place wasn't legit. Now, at first, Harper and her friends are kind of unimpressed by the facility's cheap budget and tacky methods at scaring them. But when Harper tries to leave, she learns that the slashers have trapped her party inside and intend to kill them for real. What makes the antagonists of this movie different to most horror villains is just how subversive their appearances are. See, initially the slashers look reasonably frightening since they're dressed as witches, devils, clowns, and ghosts. However, you assume that they won't be so intimidating once we get a peek of what they look like underneath these costumes. But because all of the slashers have mutilated their faces, they're actually way scarier when they take their costumes off. Even though you're expecting the slashers to look a little bit creepy underneath, nobody is prepared for the first time that you see them in what they really look like. Number 5, the Mountain Man Cold Prey. In Cold Prey, a group of friends go on vacation in the snowy mountains of Jotunheimen. When one of their party breaks his leg though, they're forced to seek shelter in an abandoned hospital. And just when things look like they couldn't get any worse, the group learn that the hotel is home to a pickaxe-wielding murderer called Gia Barth, aka the Mountain Man. At first, Gia comes across as a mindless lunatic, much like someone like Michael Myers. But after learning what he's been through, you will realize that this guy never had a chance at a normal life. That's because all the way throughout his childhood, his father abused him, locked him up, and even buried him alive in the snow, while his mother refused to intervene. After knowing nothing but cruelty since the moment that he came into the world, Gia suddenly snapped and then killed his parents. To avoid being hurt again, Gia stayed in the mountains and murdered anyone who came near him. Even though Cold Prey's plot could have functioned if this guy was depicted just as a generic baddie, the filmmakers made him far more compelling by giving him a detailed and kinda heartbreaking story. His urge to kill doesn't stem from joy or malice, but out of a warped means to survive. Number 4, the Clown. Long before John Watts directed the MCU Spider-Man trilogy, he made a little film called Clown. The story here begins with a boy called Jack who's preparing for his birthday party, and when the party clown cancels, Jack's father Kent is worried that his son's birthday will be ruined. Now, because Kent's a decent enough guy, out of desperation, he suits up in the clown outfit and puts on a show for the kids. When the festivities come to an end though, Kent notices that he can't actually take his clown suit off. And not only that, but the costume begins merging with his flesh. Upon investigation, he discovers that the outfit is actually made from the body of a clown demon. Since Kent draped himself in the clown's remains, he's actually become the demon's host, which compels him to eat children. Because Kent is a victim, you can't help but feel bad for him, which makes it all the more distressing when the clown suit compels him to do unspeakable things. Number 3, the Satan Man, Satan's Little Helper. Because there are so many uncreative slasher flicks, you kind of have to commend filmmakers when they do go against the grain, even if the end product isn't all that great. With that in mind then, let's look at Satan's Little Helper. This film revolves around a serial killer called the Satan Man, who terrorizes the town on Halloween. What makes this devilish psycho different from the average movie nutter though, is the fact that he's assisted by a 9-year-old boy called Dougie. Now, Dougie gets so angry at how his sister spends all of her time with her boyfriend Alex that he storms out of his house on Halloween. And when he finds a figure dressed in a satanic mask, Dougie mistakes him for the real devil and asks him to send Alex to hell. And after he brings Satan Man into his house, it isn't long before he's tormenting Dougie's family. Although we learn little of the murderer himself, we can tell that Satan Man is smart, since he keeps switching costumes and placing his outfit on his victims to avoid being caught. Number 2, Frank Zito, Maniac. The story centers around Frank Zito, a mentally unwell man who overlooks a mannequin business. Due to suffering trauma from his callous mother during childhood, Frank is bombarded by murderous impulses. And that's because the only time that Frank's mother was ever nice to him was when she let him brush her hair. So when he's overwhelmed by emotion, Frank goes out and scalps women and attaches their hair to his mannequin so he can relive his only happy memory. And what makes the remake superior to its predecessor is the pitch-perfect casting of Elijah Wood as Frank. Because of Woods' innocent face, it's impossible to envision him peeling the heads off innocent women, well, until you see him do it. Number 1, Joseph Creep. Creep is an amazing movie, and so much of it is shouldered by villain Joseph, played pitch perfectly by Mark Duplass. The story centers around a videographer called Aaron, played by the director Patrick Brice, who's hired to record the last days of a terminally ill man called Joseph. However, after Aaron sees the dark side of his client, he suspects that he might be in grave danger. Despite the relatively straightforward plot, Creep stands out leagues ahead of other slashers, thanks to Duplass, who keeps you constantly guessing as to his character's true intentions. He flips from being charismatic to sadistic so quickly that you never quite know just what exactly he's capable of. Another reason why Duplass fits the role like a glove is because he actually co-wrote the script as well. And he also improvised many lines on set to keep things fresh, so when his co-star seems confused, it's usually because he has no idea what the actor is actually going to do next in real life.